Leah Omar with HR Branches, and I'm going to be your MC for today. I'm here with Reanna Werner, our Chief Problem Solver, and Christina Gilbertson from Gilbertson Law Office. There are a lot of changes, a lot of legislation coming at us this year, and this week has been no different. I imagine we'll see more before the end of the year. So we are going to be discussing the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act that was signed into law by Governor Polis earlier this week. This is going to be a large impact to small businesses, so we are here to dissect it for you and how it impacts you, and maybe give you some guidance and direction on how you need to approach this and plan for this over the next few months. So some initial thoughts on your perspective. Let's start with you, Christina, and what you have seen from this bill and how this is going to impact small businesses.
Sure. First, I want to say thanks for having me, guys. It's always a pleasure to jump on these lives with you and tackle these fun things as they seem to come out of nowhere sometimes. And that's what Reanna and I were talking about before we started going live, is that this one just kind of came out of the blue for us. We weren't really expecting it. And it's kind of taking some time to kind of really digest and figure out what is this ultimately going to mean for our clients and small businesses in Colorado, because the focus has just been in other places a lot. I mean, at first glance, I think that what Governor Polis is trying to do is well-intentioned, but I feel like it maybe hasn't been thought out very well in terms of what the actual impact is going to be on these small businesses who are already struggling based on what's going on with COVID. And so it's a tough place to be right now, where we've got businesses are struggling and employees as individuals are struggling. And so trying to find that balance between the two, I think he's trying to do that. I'm just not sure what it's ultimately going to look like in the long term for this one.
I agree, Christina. You know, you and I both work with small businesses on a regular basis, and we feel their pain, especially right now. I mean, outside of the COVID era, there's always small business ownership and leadership pain, right? But you compound it with what we're going through today, and the financial strain and administrative burden on businesses today is just far greater. And then we're throwing this new legislation in here to take it 5 steps further, and it's going to be quite difficult. And we were also discussing, you know, earlier on our call as we were preparing to go live, is the administrative burden of this legislation is heavy. This is a lot for a small business owner to manage, and we'll go over that. But for the people who are joining us here, just to kind of fill you in on what we're talking about, we are talking about the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act, and just a little snippet of information just to kind of give you a basis, a foundation of info to get you started in this conversation, is this law is going to be going into effect January 1, 2021. That's 6 months from now, everybody. 6 months we have to prepare. And if you have 16 or more employees, you are going to be required to offer every single one of your employees, part-time, full-time, temporary, seasonal, it doesn't matter. If you employ them, you are responsible for offering them up to 48 hours of paid sick leave. And how they accrue this is it's 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. So in addition to that, there's a whole slew of other considerations, but let's fast forward another year, January 1, 2022, that 16 employee minimum threshold goes away, and it's all employers in the state of Colorado now have to offer this benefit. So this is going to impact every single one of us who employs even one person in the state of Colorado. Did I do okay in explaining the basics, Christina? Is there anything you'd like to add?
No, you hit everything that I would have hit, so very well.
Yes. All right, Leah, what do you want to drill into?
Okay, so we have a couple different things that we can cover And the first thing I want to start with, there's a lot of legal aspect to this bill. There's going to be some compliance aspects. So Christina, why don't you dive into some of the details of those legal aspects that the small business owners are absolutely going to need to know, how this affects them. Let's get into a little bit of the details there.
Sure. So a lot of the legal aspects kind of ties into a lot of the administrative side of things, meaning you got to make sure that you're keeping really good records of what's going on for your business. And so for documentation, I'm talking about documenting hours worked by your employees, the accrued time off they're getting, 1 hour for every 30 minutes, or 30, that would be really bad. 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, and then also showing what they are actually using and making sure that that's up to date, because you need to be able to provide that to the Department of Labor upon their request at the drop of a hat. And so it's not an area that you want to be lax in. You want to make sure that you have somebody that is really paying attention to this, because if you don't have your ducks in a row and you're not doing what you need to do, then you can find yourself on the wrong side of a complaint. There can be a complaint filed against your company by an aggrieved worker who feels like they've been retaliated against, or that they are not receiving the benefits that they're entitled to. And they have to file a complaint with the Department of Labor first before they can file a lawsuit, which is, it's a good thing. It's an opportunity for the parties to talk to each other before having to jump through the hoops of litigation, which is costly, both in terms of monetary and just, it's a time suck for everybody involved, and it's an uncomfortable place to be. But make sure that if you do find yourself on the receiving end of one of those complaints, you have 14 days to respond. And so that's not a lot of time. And so again, that's something you want to make sure you have your documents and your records in pristine shape, and that you can defend why it is that you are doing what you're doing. And if they find that you are in violation of the Healthy Families and Workplaces Act, there's going to be things like fines and other damages and other punitive things that are still seeming to be ironed out. I didn't really find anything that was super clear as to what exactly those dollar amounts are going to be just yet. And I'm sure it's going to be kind of a work in progress. And as I mentioned before, well-intentioned, but not entirely well thought out in terms of giving employers a really clear roadmap of, this is exactly what you need to do, or else this is what's going to happen. And I think that there's a lot of gray area out there that a lot of businesses are going to find themselves struggling with. As Reanna mentioned, there is a 1-year grace period essentially for the folks that have 16 or fewer employees, to help them. Hopefully by the time 2022 rolls around, we'll have a better picture of what's going on. But for anybody that's over that 16 employee threshold, there's not a lot of time to figure out what's going on. And that's both internally and from the state's perspective of making sure that they're enforcing things and how they're going to be enforcing things. So definitely want to make sure that you're taking a look at your internal processes and procedures and of how you're doing things, so that you can set yourself up for success rather than a firestorm when something goes a little bit awry and you find yourself under a deadline to respond to things that you may have not seen coming, kind of like this bill.
Right. I think that was like the scariest part, was I saw they'll be liable for any other relief. Basically, you're writing a blank check. We don't know how this is going to go. So that was a little terrifying. So thank you so much for dissecting that a little bit for us. Reanna, what's your perspective on some of the legal considerations for these small businesses from the HR perspective?
Well, when it comes to the legal perspective and administrating this type of program through an employer, there's so many other factors to consider when it looks at the legalities. Discrimination law, HIPAA law. I mean, just your record keeping alone is going to be quite complex, because you can likely request a doctor's note from your employee, right? But you can't request one from their family member. So there are going to be complexities where other laws intermingle with this requirement, and it's going to create a little bit of a wicked web in itself. When you look at discrimination laws, you not only have to document the the leave that's granted and the leave that's taken, but also looking at like your hiring practices. And medical conditions can be considered a discriminatory point. And so if you get an inkling that someone has some sort of medical ailment, which may contribute to them using more of this sick leave than usual or something along those lines, you could be held liable in a discriminatory factor. I'm probably going into a rabbit hole, but of course, you know, my brain is trying to think of all of the different parts and pieces that play into this. And so you actually have to have a strong peripheral vision when it comes to executing this legislation as well. It's not just the narrowness of this sick leave, there's more to it. Additionally, there's a huge administrative part and piece. I briefly mentioned, and I think Christina did too, the record keeping of the employees that you hire. Individually, you have to track the allocated accrued time that the employees receive and the time that they have used. Generally, if you have a good payroll system, if you're using something such as like ADP or Paychecks, it won't be that difficult. But then you get into, again, you get into the documentation part and piece, right? Because we don't want our employees taking advantage of this and falsifying the reasons why they're taking time off, right? I'm sorry, but a hangover does not qualify underneath this act. And so you want to require those doctor's notes and that validation, but you have to keep that documentation separate from a standard employment file because it is HIPAA protected information. Additionally, and Christina, I want to place a friendly bet on this with you. All right, we're going to sweeten the pot here. The state of Colorado is to be publishing a poster that we have to post publicly along with all of our other employment folders or notifications folders. Anyways, so the state is notorious for releasing this information late. So I think it won't be released until January 20th of 2021. It'll be after we're held liable and responsible for posting that poster. What do you think, Christina?
You're probably not wrong, but I'm going to take the under. I'm going to say that the governor and the state's going to be under the gun and getting a lot of pushback from people. So I'm going to be cautiously optimistic that we get it maybe December 30th or so.
Either way, right. Either way, I know for a fact HR branches will be pushing out that poster to you. So keep an eye on our Facebook page, or if you're a part of our email list, whatever it is. And I have a feeling Christina's going to be doing the same on her end. As soon as this information is available, we'll be pushing it out. In addition to the poster, you are also required to notify your employees in writing of this right. So that's not the poster. This is in addition to the poster. So the most common way you'll want to consider pushing this information out is your employee handbook, but a lot of small businesses don't have an employee handbook. Shame on you. We can fix that for you. Both Christina and I offer services to help you with your employee handbooks. Christina's amazing at it. HR Branches is amazing at it. So if you need an employee handbook, come talk to one of us right now. If you opt not to have an employee handbook, I don't know why, but some people don't want one. You at least need to have a written policy in place that you give your employees their first day of hire. And it does have to be in writing. Got that? So there's 3 administrative components that you have to factor in. I'm going to review them with you one more time really quick. Proper documentation and records on by employee, the time allocated and the time used. And then you've got that added factor in of required documentation proving the necessity for time taken. So that's 1. 2, your employment poster that you do have to have posted publicly. 3, written notice to each and every single employee. Bam. Did I miss anything, Christina?
You didn't. One thing I did want to point out though is typically when we think of paid sick leave, we think of I'm sick, I'm physically ill. This bill goes far beyond that. So workers are entitled to take their sick leave if they're the victim of domestic violence or sexual abuse or sexual assault, or if their family member has been. And while you can require documentation of your employees if they're gone for 4 days or longer, under their sick leave, you can't request that documentation for somebody who is a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault or anything like that. That's just a blatant no-no. And so that's just something that kind of has not been something that I think most businesses have ever considered as an issue that they need to be aware of. But that is another piece, that's another facet of it that, you know, again, for better or for worse for our business owners, you know, it's something that you need to be cognizant of. And so you want to make sure that when you're asking for documentation, you're not stepping over any lines there either.
You nailed it. And that's such a huge, important part and piece to this. So Christina, why don't you read off those what's the word I just drew a blank. Tell us, what exactly are the qualifiers to take this sick leave? You talked about the assault part, but there's a few. We should probably go ahead and just list it all out for everybody, right?
Sure. So if the worker has the mental or physical illness or injury or anything else that prevents them from being able to physically work, if they need to go get a medical diagnosis or some sort of a treatment that counts for, even if it's non-communicable or it's just, you know, they need to go get some sort of a treatment, then that's going to certainly count. If they need to care for a family member that is having any sort of mental or physical illness, as I mentioned, if a worker or a family member has been a victim of domestic abuse, sexual assault, or harassment, and that leave is to either seek attention or recover from a mental or physical illness caused by that physical assault or domestic abuse, or if they are going to obtain services from a victim services organization, if they're going to get counseling arising out of that event, if they're seeking relocation to get away from a bad situation, if they're seeking legal counsel, so if they're going to go meet with their attorney, then that now counts as sick leave that they're entitled to take. And then there's additional hoops to jump through when, such as now, we're dealing with a declared public health emergency. And so if that happens and a public official has ordered the closure of schools, I feel like my kids have been home for 8,000 weeks now, and hopefully they'll go back to school for a little bit, maybe, but chances, if things keep going, there's a good shot that we're going to see closures again for that type of thing. And so if that's the case, then we're going to kick back, and that's another reason that you get to get the sick leave. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
You talked about the public health emergency, and full-time employees, they are actually entitled to up to 80 hours of paid time off underneath this legislation if a public health emergency is declared. So if another public health emergency is declared, this actually ups the ante of this legislation. Isn't that correct?
That's how I read it. And it's hard to, the way that it's drafted is, I mean, we're still in a declared public health emergency. Technically, it hasn't been lifted. So, I mean, the way that I'm reading it right now is that these additional, the 80 hours is still in play. And it is through the, as my understanding, through the end of this year for sure. And we'll just see if it gets extended beyond that point. But that is another little piece of the bill that probably isn't affecting folks on this call, because most of what we're dealing with are small businesses. But if in the off chance we have somebody that has more than 500 employees who previously wasn't subject to the emergency paid sick leave for COVID stuff, this Colorado bill now adds that, provides coverage for those employers that have more than 500 employees as well. So now it's for that public health emergency, it doesn't matter what size your business is. It doesn't. That 80 hours for a full-time person it's there, and that's something that you're required as a business owner to provide for them. And it's kind of question whether or not any of the under 50 employee exemptions are going to be applying to this extended FMLA essentially for the COVID stuff. It's not clear right now, so stay tuned for that. Maybe we'll see something there, but they're really trying to make this a one size fits all approach from what I can tell, even though there's no way that one size can fit all for our smaller businesses. So it's a lot of information and a lot of things to start preparing for.
Most definitely.
So we've talked about the let's go into a little bit about if someone has a current paid time off structure. Let's say, let's take COVID out of the equation. We kind of talked about that. If they currently offer paid time off, is this in addition to? What does that look like? What are those steps?
So if an employer already has a paid time off structure that is more generous than what the bill allows for, then they don't need to do anything different unless the accrual isn't as generous. So if right now they're getting 1 hour of PTO for every 40 hours worked, they're going to have to scale that back and give their employees 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. And so from that perspective, it's a little bit more work, and it's going to be a little bit more time that your employee is going to be entitled to be out of the office. But that is something, if you're ahead of the curve at this point, kudos to you. You know, this change and this adjustment is going to be a lot easier for you. My guess is that most of our small business owners that are tuning in today are probably not on that side of things, unfortunately, because it is going to be a burden, financially, administratively, across the board. Unfortunately, not much we can do about it right now. We've got the next 6 months for our 16 to however many employees to figure out what to do, and a year and a half for those really small businesses. So start thinking about what's realistic, and keeping in mind that it's not just your full-time employees anymore. As Reanna mentioned, it's seasonal, it's temps, it's part-timers, it's everybody. And so you have to just make sure that you're ready for that. And most businesses that I have dealt with and that I work with, certainly seasonal and temp employees don't have PTO benefits. You know, that's very rare to see. Part-time is, you know, a little bit more hit and miss, but now it's important. If you're using any employee whatsoever, this is applying to you.
Yeah, and I think the key is people, I think you nailed that right there. A lot of employers are going to say, oh, well, I already offered 2 weeks of PTO to my full-time employees. But you have to go back and you really do have to evaluate your current PTO structure and understand how it fits into the mold of this legislation, because there are some nuances that you're going to have to fix, especially that accrual. This is a pretty fast rate accrual. And so most people would spread, if they offered, you know, a week of paid time off, they would spread that accrual throughout the whole entire year. Not here. It actually equates to, oh, Leah, how many weeks did you say it was? You did the math yesterday. They would accrue, a full-time employee would accrue, I think, the full 48 hours in a matter of like 36 weeks or something along those lines, right?
36 weeks, less than a calendar year. They will have those 48 hours accrued on this schedule.
Yeah, so that's a super fast accrual, which means that you've got to minimally front load that accrual. And then, you know, if you got to front load that accrual, you got to play with those accrual times. That's really important because you will have to meet that. And then, you know, what do you do with those other hours? Say you offer two weeks of PTO. So, you know, that's a total of 80 hours. Do you just keep that fast track PTO accrual going? Do you slow it down through the rest of the year? You've got a couple options there, but you're really going to have to take the next 6 months to think this through.
And also keep in mind that the PTO now will carry over to the next year. It's not something that it resets on January 1st. If somebody hasn't used it, they can tack it on to their 48 hours for 2022, you know, so it's that I know a lot of businesses kind of have that reset clock, and it's a use it or lose it, or, you know, use it or get paid for it. This doesn't require that. They can continue to roll it over if need be.
Hey, Christina, this is a really great segue into a question that's actually been glaring in my mind, and we haven't found any details on it yet. Is the rollover from year to year, can you cap at 48 hours? Or is it 48 hours per year? So by the end of year 2, are we looking at, you know, I mean, a substantial amount of time banked up? Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm not sure that I have seen an answer to that. The way that I would recommend my clients calculate it is that it's 48 hours a year. I think that that's probably ultimately going to be the intention behind it. But I don't know that for sure. That's something that definitely we'll need to keep our eye out for. But as much as as difficult as it is, and it may be, I think that that's the safer path, at least until we know more information on that particular issue. Again, one of those things that parts of this bill were kind of drafted without fully thinking them through. And I feel like that is a big hole in the bill right there.
The other hole that I'm seeing is termination payout, standard PTO and sick leave, or PTO primarily. If you terminate an employee and they have accrued time in their bank, the employer is required to pay out that amount of time that they haven't used upon termination. Again, it could be a huge financial burden if employers have to pay out any accrued time underneath this legislation upon termination. I haven't seen anything, and I've scoured the bill. Have you seen or heard anything?
I've heard that even though they're referring to it as wages for the PTO, that unused paid sick leave actually doesn't need to be paid out at termination potentially, and that said, if somebody quits and then they come back to your business within 6 months, then that previously accrued time off comes back to them. So it's not, I think that's probably going to be something that doesn't happen all the time, but that's how I'm reading the bill, is that there's at least an argument that you don't have to pay out any unused time upon termination. But again, that's something I think it's going to be pushed back on from both sides and fleshed out a little bit more, because definitely there's some conflicting information out there, but I have heard both sides of that, that yes, it does, but maybe it doesn't. So yeah, I am the lawyer getting you that gray area of, we'll see. It's one of my special skills.
I think that's been the name of the game for 2020. Well, let's hold on and see what's coming. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where all of this leads and takes us. But yeah, Leah, what other questions do you have?
So I don't think that we've covered this yet, but are small employers, do they have 36 weeks as their employees are working to figure out how they're going to pay this out? Or have we covered when the employees can utilize this time as they're accruing it? What does that look like, Ree?
They can use it immediately as soon as they accrue it. Well, let's start at the beginning. So this benefit is immediately available upon hire. So employees can start accruing time on day one. There is no waiting period here. And in addition to that, they can use this time as they accrue it. So say for an example, you've got an employee, they just started their new job. And they've worked, they hit their 30 hours. And so now they have 1 hour available underneath this benefit. Well, guess what? That following week, they can take that hour off and use that hour to go to the doctors. No questions asked. They have that immediately available to them. So that'll be interesting to see how this plays out and how it impacts business productivity, training, getting their employees up and started and moving. But yes, this is immediate on multiple ends. Christina, do you have anything to add to that? Clarify?
No, that's what I was going to jump in and say. Obviously, there's going to be a question of people who are using time before they've accrued it and what that's going to look like under this particular bill. And that's another one of the gray areas that I didn't see a clear answer to. Is it something that if they do leave, can you deduct that time from their pay, or is it this accrual is really just kind of a farce, and really that day one they have 48 hours of time potentially? That I hope that that's not the case, but there inevitably will be employees that push the limits and that will try to take time and use it before they've accrued it, and it's going to be something that we're going to have to figure out legally, what can the business owner do, and how can they protect themselves from those types of events happening.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much for covering that. So I want to break down the timeline over the next 2 years of what our small business owners need to look at, give them a little bit of a guideline to follow, and maybe provide some recommendations on how they could possibly budget for this, give them some ideas. First of all, if any of you are watching, if you have any questions that you want to submit and we can cover while we're live, go ahead and submit them in the comments. If you're watching the replay, comment and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible, or you can contact HR branches at 719-244-9640 or Christina Gilbertson. And what's your number, Christina?
It's 720-525-9275.
Okay, and I'll include that in the comments as well. So if you have any questions while we're live, please submit those. So let's talk about this timeline of, they're going to be planning. They have about 6 months to start implementing this. What are some of the important dates they need to remember? What does that timeline look like over the next 2 years? And do you have any recommendations of procedures and steps they need to take?
First and foremost, don't wait. Start it now. It's not going to, even if things get tweaked a little bit between now and the effective date of January 1st, 2021, you need to start your policy reviews now. So you're not rushing at the end of the year. Yeah, there may be some additional tweaks and everything, but do yourself a favor and start the process now. You're going to need to be, and I'm sure Reanna can certainly help with this, you're going to be needing to do a lot of training of your HR folks and your management, just making sure that they understand what these new rules are and what they're going to need to be doing. So start reviewing your employee handbook if you have one. If you don't have one, get one. For a myriad of reasons. This is just one of them. That's a very easy way that you can create a good culture in your company and make sure that your employees know what's expected of them, COVID notwithstanding. But because of all of the things that we're dealing with now, with the notice that you have to be providing to your employees, an employee handbook is the best way to do that. And it doesn't have to be really complicated or a 500-page diatribe. It can be a very straightforward manual, but you want to make sure that you have that out there, and then start figuring out ways that you can make this easier for yourself. Start figuring out what makes sense for your tracking purposes. Like Reanna said, if you've got, if your payroll provider, they should have some sort of reports that you can be running, but making sure that those, you have a policy and procedure in place for getting those records pulled, making sure that things are getting entered appropriately. If you don't have a payroll provider, maybe now is a good time to start thinking about it. You know, get one. There's so many things on our business owners' plates these days. We don't need to keep adding to it and making your lives more complicated. So get the help and the support that you need from folks who that's their world. You know, I do the legal stuff. Reanna and Leah do the HR things. You know, you didn't go into business to do all of the stuff yourself. And it's hard to keep up with everything. And so give yourself a little bit of grace and give yourself a little bit of time and start now. Get in contact with your CPA, your HR folks, your attorneys, whoever it is that's your trusted group of advisors that, you know, has a piece of the puzzle of what works, what you're doing for your business. Start that conversation now, because as things get closer to the end of the year, people who haven't planned ahead are going to be in a scramble, and it's going to make it a lot more difficult for you to get the timely guidance that you need from your professional advisors. So definitely start now. I can't stress it enough. Start now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, looking at your payroll providers, making sure your policies are in place, you're training your leadership team, you nailed all of it. It is so important to also plan for the financial hit. You pretty much have to plan for a week of non-paid product or paid non-productive time. And that will cost your business money in 2 areas, both wages and again, non-productivity, because there's going to be that additional cost of non-productivity, whether it's product not being manufactured, product not being sold, having to pay someone else to come in and fill that gap, right? To cover that time that other person's out. So actually what you want to do is anticipate those costs actually being double what those wages are. Because there is so much to consider, and you can't afford to lose that time that you hired that employee for. So there's a compounded cost that you need to start budgeting and talking with your CPA through right now. And here's the tough situation, right? We're all financially strained when it comes to our small businesses. Luckily, we had a little bit of financial relief through the PPP and the EIDL loans programs, but most businesses that I talk to right now, PPP money is gone. They've already used it to weather the storm 2 months ago. Now here we are, we're looking at a potential shutdown again in the state of Colorado. I know in El Paso County here in Colorado Springs, the mayor is giving us 2 weeks to get our COVID numbers to come down a little bit, or at least stay the same. If they go up whatsoever, we're looking at another shutdown in 2 weeks, right? We're also looking at mask mandates. I know up north, they've got mask mandates. And if we don't see these numbers starting to decline, it's inevitable we're going to see another shutdown. So there's more cost associated. So you have to be very smart and very diligent with your money right here and right now. And this is just another factor that you have to plan for. And 6 months is not a long time at all. Okay, I feel like I was lecturing my kids on, like, you know, spending money wisely, but listen to me.
Sometimes we need that. We need to hear that.
Right.
And I think another aspect of it is also, as small businesses, we need to communicate with our state representatives the pressure and the squeeze that we're feeling and how this is impacting us. They need to hear those details. They need to know, and hopefully they'll clarify. Maybe there will be a little bit of relief. This, you know, they enacted this law. It doesn't go into effect for, you know, we do have some time. So start contacting your legislative reps, start communicating what you're seeing and what you're feeling. And if you're projecting and, you know, working on this budget with your CPA, or, you know, instead of, if this is going to impact you, you're going to have to figure this out in your budget, but that's going to prevent you from hiring more people, or you may have to lay them off. You need to be communicating that so they understand that, you know, if this is going to affect the viability of, you know, 50% of the businesses in the state, that needs to be addressed, but they won't know unless you communicate that. So make sure that you are keeping those lines of communication open. That is going to make a difference. Your voice needs to be heard.
I love the fact that you brought that up, Leah, especially as, you know, there's so many gray areas within this bill here. If we can rise up and speak up and be a voice for the small business community, and everybody else watching be that voice too, we might be able to help fill those gray areas with a little bit of silver lining. So we need to have a voice and we need to have a platform. And so I love the fact that you brought that up. That's important stuff.
These decisions are being made, whether they were being talked to with small businesses and saying, and, you know, making those plans and understanding what the risks are and what the impact is going to be in the small business community. I don't know. However, you know, we don't necessarily have to just take it, right, and say, well, I'm just going to close up my business. I can't go through this. You've got to be able to make a difference. And considering 99% of the businesses in the nation are small businesses, we matter, our voices matter. So absolutely, we should have a say in this. So we've got 6 months. Make sure you're communicating. So I think we covered a lot of really great information today. Thank you both so much for taking the time to talk our small business owners through this. And is there anything else that we need to share with them moving forward that, you know, they need to consider? Maybe give them a little bit of, you know, relief from the stress of trying to chew on this. What message do you both want to leave with our small business owners today?
I think from my perspective, just remembering you're not alone in this. Everybody is feeling this right now. Everybody is scrambling, trying to figure out what does this ultimately mean for us. And so it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier, reach out to those folks that you work with, that are your trusted advisors, and people who are really diving in and trying to figure out how this is really going to look, instead of trying to figure it out all yourself. That said, be careful of going down the rabbit hole that is the internet, and there's a lot of conflicting information out there. So make sure you're really keeping an eye on reliable sources, things like the SBA, SBDCs. HR Branches does a fantastic job with their blogs and keeping things posted. I have a newsletter that I send out and try to keep things, people informed of what's going on. Just make sure that you stay away from the forums on Facebook that are, everybody's got a different voice on Facebook, and it's not always accurate, and there's a lot of emotion out there. And so just do what you can to, sift through all of it to find out what is the truth out there, what's the reliable sources, and give yourself a little bit of grace. Take a deep breath, step back, and this is a great opportunity for you to figure out what can you do for yourself to make your business life less stressful. It seems tough. It is tough. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. The next few months, couple years are going to be tough, but you've got to make sure you take a step back and give yourself some grace and do yourself some favors, and don't continue to take it all on yourself. Just get the support that you need.
Absolutely. I agree. Here's the deal. We're all business owners. It's not easy. If it were easy, everybody else out there would be a business owner and we'd have no employees. So this is another tough thing that we have to figure out. And I'd love to echo what Christina said. Rely on your trusted advisors. Rely on the experts who know how to tear this information apart and how to apply it. It's important that you rely on them, because the rabbit hole of Google will only get you into trouble. And this is going to be an important part of your business starting January 1st, going on pretty much till the end of history, right? So as long as you're doing business, this is going to become a part of your new normal. So you need to start understanding how it applies to your business today. Reach out to your trusted advisors and start making those plans to put it in motion effectively and efficiently on January 1. Plan, plan, plan. Plan the legal ramifications. Plan the financial aspects. Plan the administrative aspects. Get a plan in place. 6 months is not long. That's why we're talking about it today. So, yeah, Christina, I always love our conversations. You are just so absolutely wonderful. And I just want to throw a great big plug in there for you. I have had the opportunity to work with Christina for quite a while now. She is my trusted legal resource. I don't trust anybody else. I think the world of her. Not only is she thoughtful, detail-oriented, she's a huge small business advocate. She is responsive, and she just cares about what she does. She has a heart for what she does. So she's able to take her service offering 20 steps further than most attorneys that I've actually worked with. So, Christina, people are crazy if they decide not to work with you. Every small business should work side by side with you. So keep doing what you're doing. You inspire me every day, and I love being just, having this great partnership with you.
Oh, thank you so much. That's such kind words, and I feel the exact same working with you and Leah. And I think we're a good power team to really lead our small businesses to succeed through all of these trying times. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Our pleasure. All right, now everybody wants to go eat lunch unless they're eating right now. So, Leah, anything you want to mention and wrap up?
So I'm going to include some of your whitewater rapid rafting guides in the comments. That's going to be BRW Tax and Accounting, HR Branches, Gilbertson Law Office, the Pikes Peak SBDC, SCORE. You have so many resources available to you to help you get through these turbulent times. So those are going to be crucial. I'm going to include those. Like I said, leave comments, questions. We can answer those You look like
And
you
we
have questions.
also leave in the comments section contact information for our state and local representatives.
That would be a wonderful addition. Thank you for including that. Yes, I will include that as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Leah.
So if you're watching this on live replay, please share it with your network, share with the other small business owners that need this information. This is not optional. They will have to comply with this. There are ramifications. There's administrative and financial burdens to this. So please share this however you can. If other things come to light, we will continue updating you guys. Make sure you follow HR branches and Gilbertson Law Office, our Facebook pages, as we'll have more updates in the future. So follow us, let us know what you think, let us know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we will see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.